How's it going, Star Seekers? I hope everyone's doing alright and keeping safe. And welcome back to the channel, where today we're going to be taking a look at a game called Palindrome Syndrome on the Nintendo Switch. It's an escape room style puzzle game set in a sci-fi environment where you wake up aboard a spaceship with no memory of who you are or how you got there, and have to solve puzzles to slowly reveal the truth of your current predicament. Now, I'm a big fan of puzzle games in general, and I was interested in finding out how well this one was put together, so let's get into this review and see what's what, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with my latest reviews and content. Now, I'm going to have to keep this review a little shorter due to the fact that Palindrome Syndrome is heavily focused on puzzle solving and there's not much else to discover outside of them. To avoid spoilers, I'm going to be using a limited amount of in-game footage, and I won't be going into depth with any of the game's puzzles, but I will cover off a few of them so that you know what to expect from the game. The Switch port of Palindrome Syndrome is set to release on the 21st of April, where it's going to be priced at £8.99 in the UK and $9.99 in the US, and it's also available to play right now on Steam. So upon starting Palindrome Syndrome, our character wakes up from deep freeze and steps out into an unfamiliar room, with no idea of where he is or who he is. Now, the storyline in Palindrome Syndrome isn't overly complex, and it basically revolves around you regaining your lost memories and discovering what happened to Margaret, a scientist who you were presumably working alongside, attempting to discover a cure for some kind of disease. As you work your way through the game's puzzles, you'll uncover snippets of information which are drip-fed to you via electronic notes, and you also experience some strange voices which occasionally chime in at certain points in the game. While I didn't find the story to be anything special and you've likely experienced something similar before, it did serve a purpose to support the science-related themes of the game's puzzles. Now, if you've ever played an escape room puzzle game before, then you'll likely be familiar with the general format of them. In Palindrome Syndrome, you work your way through the ship's rooms one by one, and progression through the game is linear, requiring you to complete all of the puzzles in one room before you can unlock and move on to the next one. You're able to move about freely in rooms using the thumbsticks, can run by holding the L button, and you're able to interact with objects and puzzles by hitting the A button. Once you select a puzzle, the camera then becomes fixed, and a cursor will appear on the screen, which you then use to manipulate the different elements within the puzzle. For the most part, the game's control scheme worked well, though the cursor movement can be a little fiddly at times. Now, the puzzles in Palindrome Syndrome are all well thought out and have some decent variety to them, and I thought the developer did a good job at making them match the theme of the rooms that you find yourself in. The cafeteria, for instance, has puzzles involving food and drink, while the infirmary revolves around different medical related objects, and although some of the puzzles didn't really seem to relate to the story, for the most part I was able to see how they tied into it. Now, to give you a few examples of the types of puzzles you can expect from the game, you have things like these switch puzzles where moving one switch affects others, these drinks puzzles where you have to work out what comes next in the series, slider puzzles where you need to move squares around to reveal a clue, and others that present you with a logic puzzle which then provides a solution to another puzzle. In comparison to some puzzle games that I've played where you really need to rack your brains in order to solve puzzles and the solutions often turn out to be incredibly obscure, the puzzles in Palindrome Syndrome are all very logical, and you'll often receive clues in the form of notes, though there are several instances where you need to pay particular attention to your surroundings. Now, when it came to actually solving puzzles, I personally had very little issues solving any of them, and was able to work my way through them pretty quickly. That's not to say that the puzzles aren't challenging though, as they all still require you to work out the rules of them in order to solve them, and while in some rooms you're able to complete puzzles out of order, for the most part progression through them is linear, with one puzzle providing an item required to solve the next. Now, I'm not going to say anything more on the game's puzzles to avoid spoilers, but I will say that I had a very good time solving each of them. If you're planning on buying the game yourself, then I've also released a guide with solutions to all of the puzzles, so if you get stuck on any of them, you'll find a link in the description box below. Moving on to the visuals and audio then. On the visual side of things, I thought the design of the ship was pretty cool. It reminded me of the ship from Alien, the Nostromo, with its white walls and sterile looking environments, and I liked the way that a lot of the puzzles were actually built into them and utilised the environment. The overall quality of the textures was also pretty decent, but the game does suffer from some terrible frame rate issues, and things become incredibly choppy in almost every room. Luckily, this has very little impact on gameplay, so I had no issues working on the puzzles, but it can really mess with your eyes when you move in between rooms and puzzles. On the audio side of things, there really isn't that much to talk about. We get some generic sound effects such as our footsteps or mechanical sounds from puzzles, and the game features some nice calming ambient space music, though some of the note changes do add a bit of an eerie quality to it, which make it quite fitting for the themes presented in the game. In all, Palindrome Syndrome is a pretty good puzzle game. It's not overly difficult, which should make it more accessible to people who usually struggle with these type of games, and aside from the poor frame rate, the only other thing that I would criticise is the length of the game, which should take around 2 hours to complete, and the fact that you have to manually save the game, which I failed to do on one occasion and lost about 20 minutes of progress. When it comes to my own personal rating of the game, I'm going to be giving Palindrome Syndrome Escape Room 3 out of 5 stars. If you enjoy escape room games or just puzzle games in general and are looking for a more casual puzzle title to keep you occupied for a couple of hours, then I highly recommend checking out Palindrome Syndrome. And that about wraps up this review, so don't forget to hit that like button if it helped you out, let me know in the comments section below what your favourite puzzle games are, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel as I upload new Switch game reviews every few days. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.